Right, thanks, Alex.
Looks like Jackie Tan.
A little bit. It's not, though.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Barry here from Vixen Travel. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Apologies for the little delay there. We had a few issues with our cameras and things in various places around Australia. It is our last armchair presentation for the season, and I think we've got an absolute cracker for you today. We're joined by our good friend and partner, Craig Farrell, who's over in Melbourne, freshly out of quarantine and itching to get over here and see us in the West.
Not quarantine, but out of lockdown, Barry.
Almost.
Yeah.
But today you're going to be talking about a very exciting new ship that's coming into your fleet. I'm going to hand straight over to you, mate. The next 30 minutes is all yours.
Thank you very much, Barry, and sorry for the delay, everyone. That was indeed my issues over here in Melbourne getting online. So thanks for being patient. And as Barry said, my name's Craig Farrell from PONANT, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today to speak about the newest ship in our fleet, which will be Le Commandant CHARCOT, and it'll be launching in the first half of next year. And I shouldn't just put it in with the rest of our fleet, because it is going to be a totally different vessel than what we've ever had before, but also really that the world's ever seen before, and really redefine polar exploration going forward, which is extremely exciting. So we'll get into it. It's the world's first hybrid electric polar explorer, capable of traveling deeper into the Arctic and Antarctica than we've ever traveled before. So as I mentioned, it'll be launching in the first half of next year. And here's some recent shots of her in various stages of construction. She's currently over in Norway, undergoing her final fit out of the interiors. So she recently, I think a couple of months ago, was in Saint-Nazaire in France, where her ASI pods were fitted. And you can see a shot there on the right before the ASI pods were fitted. And these are these enormous things at the bottom of the ship, which basically control the propellers. And what that will mean is that now that they're on, the propellers, these huge propellers, will actually be able to rotate a full 360 degrees, which will basically enable us to get out of any situation that we find ourselves in the ice, because effectively this ship is built to go to the geographic North Pole. I think that it's, from what I read, it's the 15th or 16th ship that'll ever reach the geographic North Pole. And it was actually, I was speaking to a colleague recently, it's actually the North Pole itself was discovered after we put people onto the moon. So that sort of puts it into perspective, I think, as to how rare and rarely visited some of these areas that she'll go to will be. So with these ASI pods, and obviously with the strength of the hull, she'll have the capability of comfortably cruising through sort of 3 to 4 meter thick sea ice or pack ice, but it'll also have the strength to sort of get through walls of ice up to 10 or 11 meters. So what can happen is ice expands and contracts, and sometimes when the sea ice can expands, it can force it up into the air and up into these walls of ice. So we'll be able to get through those areas. But usually there's gaps in the sea ice, so we'll actually be able to maneuver through to get to the majority of these areas. But it's really exciting, and exciting to see shots like this. We don't often show half-built ships in presentations, but we're getting to the final stages of the construction now, which is really exciting. So to compare CHARCOT, and I will compare it to the rest of our fleet, there's a similar number of guests on board to what our sister ships have. So for those of you that are familiar with PONANT, you might know of L'Austral, Le Soleil that's coming up to the Kimberley next year. They're around a maximum of 260 guests. We never really have any more than about 230, because there's always solo travellers, and there's always also a lot of standard staterooms that become suites. So we always have never travel at the full capacity, so it's a similar number, almost exactly the same is the maximum number of guests that we can have on board. but the ship itself is 3 times the size of L'Astrale and Le Boreal and the others in the sister ship. So a big crew, as you can see there. The length is about the same, but it's wider and 3 times heavier, and that's to enable us to go to these remote areas and deal with the sea ice when we are in these areas. Sustainability is really at the heart of everything we do at PONANT in terms of designing specific itineraries, but also designing the ship. So we were recently awarded or ranked the most environmentally friendly cruise line in the planet by a German non-government organisation, which we were really proud of that. And this ship really takes that to the next level. So it's hybrid electric and powered by liquefied natural gas. She'll have very, very advanced wastewater and recycling systems on board to ensure that nothing leaves the ship at all. And on expeditions with us, you're given, reusable water bottles and things like that. So we try and minimize our single-use plastics as well. And in fact, I was lucky enough to go to Antarctica earlier this year in late February, March. I didn't see one plastic bottle used on the whole trip, which was really pleasing. That's even come a long way in the last couple of years. And there's also a big focus with Le Commandant Charcot on the science. So the ship itself will be equipped with wet and dry laboratories. There's a computer room to collate the data. We've got cabins set aside dedicated to scientists. So we'll be working with different universities and scientific organisations around the world to be able to take their scientists and conduct research in these areas that they've rarely, if ever, been able to access before. And of course, our guests will benefit from that. So we always have a citizen science program, if you like. There's sort of 2, in France in particular, there's 2 levels of science, and they kind of translate to hard science and soft science. But basically, it's citizen science would be classed as soft science, so learning about what's happening up into these areas and doing some of the research. But also this hard science is real science, if you like. So scientists going on board and conducting research, which our guests will be able to get involved in as well, which is something very exciting. And we've put this slide in here just to show you the capability of Le Commandant Charcot. So the strongest ship that the guests can travel on currently is the 50 Years of Victory. And we're just below that. So it's PC1, we're PC2. And it's a bit like chalk and cheese. Well, not chalk and cheese, but it's but we're really the strongest vessel ever built specifically to take guests and to take tourists to these areas. We're not a sort of converted research vessel, so it'll be a very, very comfortable ride to some of these areas. And you can see where that rates with the sister ships and explorers. They're also ice strengthened. They're built for Antarctica and the Arctic, but not to go as far as what Le Commandant Charcot will go. So as well as being the strongest ever ship built for tourism and science, as I mentioned, PONANT is sort of renowned for its onboard luxury and comfort, taking guests to these really remote parts of the planet, but also doing it comfortably and doing it in a very nice way. And Le Commandant Charcot is actually a beautiful tie-in to that. He was known, the Captain Charcot was known as the gentleman of the poles. So he was a doctor and an explorer. He went to Antarctica and the Arctic, but he did it in a really nice way. So he used one of the first ships that actually had insulation, so it was more comfortable on board. But also, as you can imagine, being French, lots of champagne and good food and things like that. And we really have tried to carry on that tradition, I suppose. So Le Commandant Charcot, even though it's going to these really harsh areas, it'll be doing it in that level of comfort and style that PONANT's renowned for. So when you step on board, you'll be greeted by this beautiful atrium with LED screens there, as you can see, which will show information, on the areas that we're visiting and sometimes footage from outside as well. With a glass roof there, there's several lounge and areas to relax in, both large and small on board, and restaurant options as well. So we have 2 main restaurants and also an outdoor dining area. So all meals and drinks are included, like on any PONANT expedition. And you can also have light meals in one of the lounges quite regularly, or there's 24-hour room service as well. So if you're absolutely exhausted after a big day of exploring, you can enjoy a meal in your stateroom or suite as well. There's actually, for the first time on a PONANT vessel, there's a viewing platform around the entirety of deck 5, which will be fantastic. Obviously, you can walk around there, use it for exercise, but also you can walk all around there and have uninhibited views of the surrounding areas that we're traveling to. This area here at the back of the ship is called our Blue Lagoon. So it's like a plunge pool, which will be obviously heated. So you can jump in there and enjoy a relaxing swim surrounded by ice, which will be a really unique experience. So there's a bigger emphasis, and because we've got this extra space on board, there's a bigger focus on well-being. So we have both that Blue Lagoon plunge pool outside. There's an indoor pool, a gym, spa. There's even an invigorating snow room, as you can see in the center bottom of the picture there. So apparently it's quite good for you, Barry, if you jump into the snow room and then into a sauna. I think they've actually gone a little bit too far with just filling up the space that's on board, because this ship's only going to the Arctic and Antarctica. So I would have thought there's enough snow and cold weather out on the balconies anyway. But anyway, that's what they've decided to do. All of the staterooms and suites have their own balconies, and obviously beautifully appointed cabins, as all of the PONANT ships are. And there's also a big selection of suites on board. So 31 suites, and that's almost a quarter of the accommodation on board. So ranging from deluxe suites, and then we've got on the top left-hand side of the screen there, you can see these beautiful 4 two-story duplex suites at the rear of the ship. And on the right-hand side, top there, and the bottom picture, that's our owner's suite, which will be, if it's not the biggest suite at sea, it would be amongst the top handful. It'll be exceptional, actually. So it's 125 square meters, and it opens out to a 122 square meter private terrace at the rear of the ship, which is perfect place. All of our main suites on all the ships are at the rear, so you're protected by the weather when we're cruising, or protected from the weather. And it's got its own jacuzzi out there, which is stunning as well. That's an interior rendering. These are brand new renderings we've just got from the architect actually in the last week, and that's the owner's suite there, and the owner's suite bathroom, which looks a fairly spectacular way to travel. I think that's got your name written all over it, Barry. The owner's suite there. And one of the other big differences on Le Commandant CHARCOT, and partly this is dictated by the areas that we're visiting, is the range of activities that are available from the ship. So whenever you travel on any expedition with PONANT, you can expect to do things like zodiac cruising. There'll be hikes and walks, or obviously interaction with wildlife. We offer kayaking on all of the sister ships going down to Antarctica and the Arctic as well. But on top of all those activities, there's a whole range of new activities that'll be available on Le Commandant CHARCOT. So these are things like dog sledding in the Arctic. There'll be snowmobiles available. There's a hot air balloon which is attached to the ship, which is very important because we're going to very remote areas, so you don't want the hot air balloon just drifting away. But it'll go up around 50 meters in the air, so you get this incredible vantage point for these areas that we're visiting, which is spectacular. There are a couple of helicopters on board, but we're not using those at this stage for activities. That'll be more for safety, but also to head up and head out in front of the ship to see, to find safe passages to cruise through the ice and things like that. So the hot air balloon will be the most obviously environmentally friendly way to get up in the air and have a fantastic view of the surrounding areas. For experienced cold water divers, there'll be ice diving available, and that is apparently spectacular, even in somewhere like Antarctica, where above water, as you know, Barry, it's all very much blues and blacks and whites and greys, but underwater it's spectacular. So with coral and marine life and everything. So there'll be some quite tight restrictions around that. You will have had to have dived in less than 2-degree water. I think it's within 12 months. We're waiting on the details of that, but within 12 months of boarding for the trip, you'll have to have had some experience doing that to be able to dive in these areas. There'll be hovercraft on board as well, and you think, well, that's amazing, but it makes sense, right? Because when we're going on the sea ice, a Zodiac is not that practical because there might not be enough water around to actually cruise through these areas. So we'll be using Zodiacs to get out and have a look around and to make landings, across ice, to make landings and go on hikes and things like that as well. So a really incredible range of activities off the ship, but then on board, obviously you've seen the activities available on there as well. So I think you'll agree that it is a spectacular looking ship, but more spectacular is the areas that it's going to open up for us to travel to. And we've decided to focus on Antarctica today. Barry obviously will be doing the Arctic when it first launches next year. So places like the Northwest Passage and up into the Northeast Greenland National Park, the biggest national park in the world, which is protected by sea ice for much of the year. So that's really exciting. But at this stage, we've just got our fingers crossed that we can head up to Europe next year. But at this stage, we're focusing more on Antarctica because that's probably more realistic in terms of our Australian clients being able to get there. So it'll be the inaugural season for Le Commandant Charcot, obviously, next season. So the end of 2021 into early 2022. And Antarctica, we've done an Antarctica presentation before, Barry, so I won't bang on too much about it as a place, but I've been selling Antarctica for 10 years and speaking about it and wanting to go there for well over 20, and it exceeded every expectation that I had when I went there. So it really is spectacular. It does feel like the last completely pristine wilderness area on the planet, and it's just incredible how much it does with so little. I mentioned before that in terms of the color palette, it is a lot of blacks and whites and blues and lots of shades of gray. But with the change of light, it's just spectacular. Every time you look out the window, there's just another incredible view. And then you add to that the wildlife. Never nowhere else in the world will you see the abundance of wildlife that you see in Antarctica. And I kind of found it similar to, I was lucky enough to do the Galapagos many years ago, and it's similar. They've never been hunted or anything, the wildlife there, so they've got no fear of humans, so they come right up to you and you can interact with the wildlife. Some of the wildlife you don't want to get too close to because they are a bit more ferocious than what they look, but it is an absolutely spectacular place and a photographer's dream. I've actually borrowed some of Mick Fogg, our expedition manager's photographs here. These are some that he took of penguins porpoising a couple of years ago down there. So they are spectacular shots. But it's just the scale of it, it's, you just can't really put it into words. Just being dwarfed by huge walls of ice and glaciers, and it's a spectacular place to be. And a lot of us think of it, I always thought it's a once in a lifetime destination, but as soon as I got back, I'm ready to go again. And what we're finding with Le Commandant Charcot, that even with the bookings that people are making on it, I reckon about sort of half of the bookings that we've already made on Charcot are people that are going back to Antarctica. So they perhaps have experienced the Antarctic Peninsula, which is what us and most operators see, and it is incredibly spectacular. But because Charcot is opening up new areas of Antarctica, people are deciding to go back and go a little bit further. So it's exciting. So this is, I was going to say an average day, but not every day we'd be walking on pack ice like that. It definitely depends on the condition of the weather and the ice. But every day, we make a real focus of getting everyone off the ship, no matter where we are, off the ship as much as possible. I mean, as you've seen, the ships are spectacular, but we want you off experiencing the destination. So for that reason, we cap the numbers of guests down there. You saw earlier that we can we can fill a ship at 270 guests, same as the sister ships, but we're only taking 200 down to Antarctica at a time. And that ensures that everyone can get off, weather permitting, twice a day to do different activities, because only 100 people are allowed ashore at any one time. We can have 200 off in the one place, but 100 would be making a landing, and the other 100 will be out on Zodiac cruises or kayaking and doing other things. But any more than that, and it just limits your ability to get off the ship as often as we'd like you to. More great wildlife shots. So generally the whales are down in Antarctica, well, when they're finished in the Kimberley, basically. So they're sort of arriving in the first week of December or thereabouts, and there for the rest of the season. So the wildlife varies a little bit in terms of when you're down there. Penguins will be, I guess, there's been more activities with the penguins and things in after Christmas or around Christmas and New Year. All the penguins are hatching, and by sort of middle of January, all the little babies are out and about. So there's a bit more activity in terms of the penguins there. But some of these areas that we're visiting, and this is another thing, Barry, I picked up from Nico the other night, some of these penguin rookeries that we're going to visit will be the first humans ever to go and visit some of these areas. And we only know that there's penguin rookeries there is because they're viewed from space on satellite. So that's how we know that there's these huge colonies of emperor penguins and these sorts of things down there. But no human, to our knowledge, has ever visited some of these rookeries. So it really is an incredible opportunity. So we'll have a look at a couple of the specific itineraries now. So starting from late next year. And this is a brand new one, actually. This has been released recently in the last few weeks after we'd had the season on sale for quite a while. We made a change to an itinerary so we could make the most of the total solar eclipse down there. And we'll actually be lower, so more south than any other ship, and we'll be in the only place where the total solar eclipse is going to be 100% visible on Earth. So this is an incredible opportunity to combine the Antarctic Peninsula. You'll visit the South Shetlands and all the way down into the Weddell Sea and see the Larsen Ice Shelf, the second biggest ice shelf down there, as well as seeing the solar eclipse, which will be fantastic. I believe it's on the 4th of December. I think is the total eclipse. So I stand to be corrected on that one, but that's a brilliant itinerary. And just to point out as well, if you're looking at that map at the moment, where the little circle is the middle circle, actually, so we're just below North Antarctic Peninsula, that's about as far in the middle of summer that one of the sister ships or any other ship really could get into the Weddell Sea because of the huge big tabular icebergs and obviously smaller icebergs as well. You can't go too far down into the Weddell Sea as a general rule. But with CHARCOT, because it's safe to do so, we'll be able to go all the way down into the Weddell Sea and visit the Larsen Ice Shelf, which will be really, really spectacular. But these tabular icebergs, some of them, Barry, are several kilometres long. We saw one down there. We just sort of poked into the Weddell Sea for a morning cruise, and the one we saw was 1.5 kilometres long, but they get bigger than that. They're incredible. So they break off the Larsen Ice Shelf and float around there. And I mean, this looks spectacular, this shot, but it's kind of hard. You need a Zodiac or something in front of it to give it some scale. It's just, it's incredible. And these are some of these areas. This is CHARCOT and Peter First Island. So CHARCOT Island was kind of named after Commandant CHARCOT. Well, it was named by Le Commandant CHARCOT, but in honor of his father, actually. So it was named to honor his father. And CHARCOT Island is one of the places on this itinerary. And so you can see a line through that map there which says the Antarctic Circle. Very, very few expeditions ever go beyond the polar circle. So maybe a couple of hours per season do. But here you can see every single place on the itinerary that you're visiting is well beyond the Antarctic Circle. And this is some of these areas where you'll be visiting penguin colonies, emperor penguin colonies, so the big ones, which are rare to see on any Antarctica trip. But these colonies for the first time ever, the first humans ever to do so. So it will be an amazing trip to be on this one. And Peter First Island as well has had fewer visitors than have set foot onto the moon. So that's another incredible first for us to go and visit some of these areas in the Bellingshausen Sea. So yeah, unbelievable itinerary. So just some shots there of the emperor penguin. So it's quite the penguins that you would normally see on an Antarctic peninsula trip would be Gentoo and Chinstrap, and I'm forgetting about 3 others, Barry. A lot of people will visit South Georgia, and that's where you'll see the king penguins, which are the second biggest, but it's quite rare to see emperor penguins, which are the biggest. And this is a great area, this Bellingshausen Sea, and all along the west coast of Antarctica around to the Ross Sea. They're great for the emperor penguin colonies of, you know, potentially 50 to 100,000 pairs of these birds, which is, you know, it blows your mind a little bit. Here's another one. So the WEDDELL Sea and Larsen Ice Shelf. So it's very similar to the itinerary we looked at earlier, which included the solar eclipse, but this one's over New Year's next year. So the one, sorry, I'm just going to go back for a moment there. This one was our Christmas cruise, the CHARCOT and Peter First Island. So I knew there was something else I was supposed to add to that one. But if you were thinking of a white Christmas at some stage, Barry, it's not going to get more white than that one. And our other kind of celebratory cruise next year to Antarctica is this one here. So it departs on the 27th of December. And what an amazing thing to do, be at the bottom of the world to ring in 2022, which would be incredible. So again, the big tabular icebergs of the WEDDELL Sea. And this one's getting into January, so you're going to see more of the young penguins sort of getting out and about. This one's a couple of months old. This one here, where it's sort of growing its adult feathers, and the baby ones are falling off. So you'll see a bit more of that activity with the baby penguins and things, certainly from the first week of January or thereabouts. And then we often talk about the Northwest Passage up in the Arctic as being the ultimate expedition, and it is in terms of the north. And I think the ultimate expedition in the south would have to be the Ross Sea, or going to the Ross Sea, because this, you're really following in the footsteps of the great explorers, you know, Shackleton and obviously Ross and Bellingshausen as well. It's just a trip through history, really. We might be lucky enough to see some of those huts. You know, Shackleton's huts are down along this side of Antarctica as well. It's a long trip, so 24 nights on CHARCOT, departing on the 15th of February 2022. But in many ways, this has got everything that Antarctica has to offer. You know, it's colder around to the Ross Sea. It's the biggest ice shelf in the world. It's known as the world's last ocean. So the last completely intact marine ecosystem on the planet is the Ross Sea, and protected by the Ross ice shelf. So just incredible. The wildlife will seem more immense down here, and you'll feel like you're discovering it for the first time, like the early explorers is. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's just amazing to think we can now reach these areas in a level of comfort. And then and when you're there thinking of how the early explorers did it, is unbelievable. And the Ross Sea, where we're going to, it's only a few hundred kilometers from the South Pole. So you're really going into another world down there. Great wildlife, as I mentioned, so lots of penguins and whales down there in February. And this could be anywhere in Antarctica. This is actually a shot of closer to the Antarctic Peninsula, but this is what it's all about. You know, I could show you thousands of pictures of the ship, but it's really about getting out and experiencing it as often as you can. And with all of our expeditions as well, it's worth noting that it is, we can cater every outing to people's level of interest, but also their level of ability. So a lot of people, when we make a landing in Antarctica, will stay where the landing site is, because often that's where the wildlife's coming ashore. That's where there'll be majority of the penguins as well. But if people are feeling more active and want a bit of an adventure, they can absolutely go on an 1.5 hour hike with members of the expedition team as well. So there's lots of opportunities to do that. And that's Shackleton's hut actually there. And then we do have one as well, which covers areas that we spoke about earlier. So the WEDDELL Sea, and for a lot of people, this is really the highlight of any Antarctic trip. and it's not actually Antarctica, it's a sub-Antarctic island, South Georgia. So this is an opportunity to see the best of the peninsula and the Weddell Sea, and then finish with South Georgia, which is where these hundreds of thousands of king penguins you can view there, which is spectacular. I wasn't lucky enough to do South Georgia actually, so there's another reason I need to go back, Barry, but look at that. So you can stand places like Salisbury Plain, I think it is, where there's 250,000 king penguins, which is just hard to imagine. And they tell me the smell